They abandoned me and my child at a shelter like we were excess baggage, like our lives had lost all value the moment we became inconvenient. No goodbye, no explanation that mattered, just a door closing behind us and the sound of footsteps walking away. My child was 5 years old, clutching my hand, asking questions I had no answers for. In that moment, I felt something break inside me, but something else was born too. A cold clarity, a realization that if the people who were supposed to protect us could disappear so easily, then survival was no longer optional. It was mandatory. The shelter was loud and quiet at the same time, loud with stories of loss, quiet with the weight of shame people carry when they feel discarded. Every night I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to my child breathe, promising silently that this place would not define us. I had nothing left to lose, and that is a dangerous position for anyone to underestimate. They thought leaving us there was the end of our story. What they never understood is that rock bottom can become a foundation. I learned to move differently. I stopped explaining myself. I stopped asking for understanding. I observed. I worked. I endured. Every insult swallowed, every tear hidden, every sleepless night added another layer of steel. People mistake silence for surrender. They confuse patience with weakness. I let them. While they were comfortable believing I was broken, I was rebuilding piece by piece, not just for myself, but for the small human who depended on me to show them what strength looks like when no one is watching. There were days I wanted to quit, moments when anger burned so hot it scared me. But anger alone doesn't build a future. Discipline does, consistency does, purpose does. I turned pain into fuel and routine into refuge. Slowly, the world that had closed its doors began to crack them open again, not because of sympathy but because I had become someone impossible to ignore. Skills sharpened, confidence returned. My child stopped asking when we would go home and started believing that wherever we stood together was enough. And then one day, without drama or announcement, I realized something had changed. I was no longer surviving. I was advancing. The people who abandoned us had frozen us in their minds as a failure, a burden they escaped. They never updated the story. They never imagined growth in the dark, strength forged without witnesses, success built without applause. That was their mistake. Revenge, I learned, isn't about confrontation or proving someone wrong with words. It's about living so well, so solidly, that their absence becomes irrelevant. It's about becoming someone who no longer needs closure from people who chose to walk away. I didn't rise out of spite. I rose out of necessity. And that made all the difference. Today, when I look at my child, I don't see the night we were abandoned. I see resilience being passed down quietly, lesson by lesson. I see a future built on self-respect instead of permission. They thought abandoning us would erase us. Instead, it refined us. They thought they left us with nothing. They were wrong. They left us with hunger, and hunger creates warriors. They never expected what I'd become. And that is exactly why I did. They abandoned me and my child at a shelter, and in that moment betrayal stopped being an abstract word and became something physical. Something that sat heavy in my chest and tightened every breath. Betrayal by family cuts deeper than any wound because it comes from the hands you trusted to hold you up, not push you away. When the people who gave you life decide you are no longer worth the effort, it forces a brutal question on you. Will this destroy you, or will it reshape you into something harder, sharper, and impossible to break? I remember standing there with my 5-year-old, realizing that the safety I believed was permanent had vanished in seconds. There was no warning, no preparation, just the sudden understanding that love with conditions is not love at all. In that instant, I could feel myself collapsing inward, shame and fear mixing with disbelief. But beneath that collapse, something else began to form. A quiet anger. Not loud, not reckless, but focused. The kind of anger that doesn't scream, it studies. Betrayal strips away illusions. It removes the comfort of assuming someone will save you. And when that comfort is gone, you are left exposed to reality. Reality doesn't care about excuses or intentions. Reality asks only one thing: what are you going to do now? I had a child looking at me for answers, and even though I didn't have them, I knew one thing for certain: I could not afford to fall apart. Weakness was no longer just my problem. It would become my child's inheritance if I let it win. People talk about being destroyed by pain, but destruction is not always an ending. Sometimes it is a process. Being broken open forces you to confront parts of yourself you never had to use before, skills you never sharpened, strength you never tested. When family betrayal removes the safety net, it also removes hesitation. There is a strange freedom in having nothing left to lose. Fear still exists, but it loses its power to paralyze. Survival becomes instinct, not choice. I stopped expecting fairness. I stopped waiting for apologies that would never come. The energy I once spent trying to understand why they did what they did was redirected into figuring out how to move forward. Every rejection hardened my resolve. Every reminder of being unwanted became proof that I needed to become self-sufficient in ways comfort never would have demanded of me. Betrayal didn't just hurt me, it trained me. What people don't understand is that being abandoned by family forces an internal reckoning. You either internalize the message that you are disposable, or you reject it entirely and build a new identity from the ground up. I chose the second path, not because it was easier, but because the first would have ended me. I refused to let my child grow up believing that being left behind was their fault or their destiny. Pain has a way of clarifying priorities. When everything is taken, you see what truly matters: dignity, growth, protection. I began to realize that those who betrayed me expected me to crumble, to remain frozen in that moment of abandonment. They assumed pain would weaken me. They never considered that pain, when faced head-on, can become a forge. I did not emerge untouched. Betrayal leaves scars. But scars are evidence of survival, not failure. They mark the moment you were tested and did not disappear. Family betrayal tried to erase me. Instead, it carved out a version of me that no longer relied on permission, approval, acceptance to exist. What was meant to destroy me became the pressure that shaped me. Survival changes a person in ways comfort never can, and I learned that the moment survival stopped being an idea and became my daily reality. When you are stripped of safety, routine, and certainty, you begin to see the world with sharper eyes. Every sound matters, every opportunity counts, every mistake costs more than it ever did before. Comfort softens people because it allows them to assume tomorrow will look like today. Survival removes that assumption and replaces it with urgency. Living in that state rewires your mind. You stop dreaming in vague hopes and start thinking in practical steps. How to stretch time, how to stretch energy, how to stretch faith when there is nothing visible to support it. I learned to function on exhaustion, to think clearly under pressure, to make decisions without emotional cushioning. These are not lessons taught in safe environments. They are carved into you, and failure is not an option. There is a quiet dignity in survival that most people never notice. From the outside, it looks like stagnation, like someone standing still. But inside, there is constant motion, calculation, adaptation, growth. People who have never faced true scarcity often mistake this stillness for weakness. They assume if you are not loud about your struggle, you must not be struggling at all. In reality, survival demands silence. Noise wastes energy. Drama distracts. When everything you have must be preserved, you learn to move carefully. Survival also teaches you restraint. I felt anger many times, but I couldn't afford to act on it. Anger burns resources. It clouds judgment. I learned to store it instead, to let it settle into determination. Every setback became information. Every obstacle became a lesson. I watched how systems worked, how people responded to confidence versus desperation, how patience opened doors that force never could. Survival sharpened my awareness in ways success later would simply reward. There were moments when giving up would have been easier, when accepting the role of victim would have brought sympathy, maybe even assistance. But survival is not about sympathy. Sympathy fades. Skills last. I chose to learn instead of complain, to build instead of beg. Each small win reinforced a larger truth. I was becoming capable. Not lucky. Not rescued. Capable. My child watched this transformation without understanding it fully, but children feel stability before they understand it. They sense that despite our circumstances, there was order, there was effort, there was direction. Survival forced me to become consistent even when I was tired, calm even when I was afraid, strong even when I felt empty. Comfort had never demanded that level of control from me. Survival did. Over time, I realized something unsettling but empowering. The person I was becoming could never exist in the life I lost. That version of me required pressure. It required responsibility without backup. It required learning to trust myself completely. Comfort would have kept me dependent. Survival made me autonomous. People often ask how someone endures that kind of hardship without breaking. The answer is simple and uncomfortable. You break, but you break forward. Pieces fall away that you no longer need. Illusions, expectations, dependence. What remains leaner, more focused, and far more dangerous to underestimate. Survival doesn't make you kind or cruel by default. It makes you honest. By the time stability begins to return, you are no longer the same person who entered survival mode. Your tolerance for excuses disappears. Your respect for effort deepens. Your fear of loss shrinks because you have already lived without. Comfort teaches people what feels good. Survival teaches people what actually matters. Silence, patience, and endurance are often mistaken for weakness because the world has learned to measure strength by noise. People respect volume, aggression, and immediate reaction. They admire those who announce their power loudly and often. When someone stays quiet, absorbs pressure, and continues forward without explanation, it unsettles them. Silence doesn't fit the narrative they understand, so they label it fear, defeat, or submission. I learned very quickly that letting them believe that was not a disadvantage. It was an advantage. In moments of loss and abandonment, speaking too much would have drained what little strength I had. Defending myself to people who had already decided my worth was pointless. Explaining my pain would not have reduced it. So I became quiet, not because I had nothing to say, but because every word needed to be saved for survival. Silence became a form of control. While others talked, judged, and assumed, I observed. I listened. I learned. Patience is another quality that gets misunderstood. To those who have never been forced to wait, patience looks like passivity. They don't see the discipline it requires to hold your ground without immediate reward. They don't understand how much strength it takes to keep moving forward when progress is invisible. Patience is not the absence of ambition, it is ambition under restraint. It is choosing long-term outcomes over short-term relief. Endurance, especially, is rarely respected until it produces results. No one applauds you while you are carrying weight in the dark. There is no recognition for showing up day after day when nothing seems to change. Endurance is lonely because it happens when no one is watching and no one is helping. But it builds something deep. It builds trust in yourself, the kind of trust that doesn't collapse when external support disappears. People who underestimated me did so because they measured me by my reactions. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I didn't perform my suffering for their understanding. That absence of reaction made them comfortable. They assumed I had accepted defeat. They assumed I lacked the courage to fight back. What they never realized was that I was fighting in a way they couldn't see. I was investing in consistency instead of confrontation. Silence allowed me to avoid unnecessary battles. Not every fight deserves your energy. Not every insult requires a response. Endurance teaches you to be selective, to protect your focus. While others wasted time proving points, I spent that time building capacity, skills, stability, confidence. All of it accumulated quietly, without announcement. There is power in being underestimated. When people believe you are weak, they stop guarding themselves. They stop paying attention. They reveal their patterns, their mistakes, their limits. Silence creates space for observation, and observation creates leverage. I learned who could be trusted, who spoke without acting, and who disappeared when pressure arrived. That knowledge became protection. Patience also kept me from becoming bitter. Reacting impulsively would have turned my pain outward in destructive ways. Waiting allowed pain to mature into clarity. Endurance filtered emotion into purpose. Over time, what once felt like restraint became composure. What once felt like silence became confidence. I no longer needed validation because I understood my direction. The strongest moments in my growth did not look impressive. They looked ordinary, repetitive, unremarkable. But they were deliberate. Silence guarded my momentum. Patience extended my vision. Endurance carried me through days when motivation was gone. These traits didn't announce themselves, but they worked relentlessly. When people finally noticed change, they assumed it happened suddenly. They never saw the quiet discipline behind it. They never saw the hours of waiting, the refusal to react, the choice to continue without recognition. Silence didn't weaken me, it protected me. Patience didn't slow me down, it aligned me. Endurance didn't just keep me going, it transformed me. True revenge is not payback, because payback keeps you tied to the people who hurt you. It traps your future inside their past actions and gives them continued control over your emotions. I learned that real revenge is far quieter and far more final. It is becoming undeniable. It is building a life so solid that the ones who walked away no longer matter in the way they once did. They don't get explanations, confrontations, or dramatic moments. They get irrelevance. At first, I thought revenge meant proving them wrong, directly, letting them see the damage they caused and the strength that rose from it. But that kind of thinking still centers them in the story. It keeps your progress dependent on their reaction. True revenge removes them from the narrative entirely. It shifts your focus inward, toward growth that doesn't require witnesses or approval. Becoming undeniable is a long process. It's not about sudden success or public victory. It's about consistency when no one is applauding. It's about standards that don't drop when circumstances get hard. Every disciplined choice compounds. Every time you choose progress over bitterness, you reclaim a piece of yourself that was taken. Over time, those reclaimed pieces form something unshakable. There is a particular power in success that is not announced. When you move quietly, people can't interfere as easily. They can't sabotage what they don't know exists. Growth in silence protects your momentum. It allows you to build without the weight of expectations or the pressure of proving anything. By the time results are visible, they are already established. I learned that the most satisfying outcome is not watching someone regret their actions, but realizing you no longer need them to. Indifference is stronger than anger. Peace is stronger than confrontation. When you stop seeking closure from those who abandoned you, you close the door yourself. That act alone is a form of victory. Becoming undeniable also changes how you see yourself. You stop measuring worth by how others treat you. You measure it by how you treat your responsibilities, your commitments, and the people who depend on you. Your confidence stops being fragile because it is buoy. LT on evidence, not opinion. You know what you've endured. You know what you've built. No one can argue with that. Revenge through growth teaches patience. It accepts that transformation takes time and that rushing it only creates shallow results. Deep change is slow, often uncomfortable, and mostly invisible. But when it's complete, it doesn't need to announce itself. It simply stands. The people who once underestimated you may eventually notice the distance between who you were and who you became. But by then, their recognition means nothing. The gap exists whether they acknowledge it or not. Your life has moved forward without their permission. In the end, becoming undeniable is not about winning against someone else. It is about winning against the version of yourself that might have given up. It is choosing growth over resentment, purpose over revenge, and strength over spectacle.